Welcome to the Death Tally, where we add up all the casualties in our beloved horror films. I'm Dallas M. Pomfrey, and today we're looking at Paranormal Activity. Released in 2009, Paranormal Activity was only made for $15,000 and went on to gross $193 million at the box office. Directed by Oren Peli, Paranormal Activity went on to spawn 5 sequels, with the 6th one on its way. The whole movie was filmed in director Oren Peli's own home within only 10 days. With a cast of originally 8 people, only 5 remain in the final film, with the 2 main characters being played by Katie Featherston and Mika Sloat, playing Katie Featherston and Mika Sloat, both only being paid $500 each for their roles, with the actors not given scripts, but only guidelines on how to act and what to talk about in their scenes. With the similar success story to the Blair Witch Project, both movies were made on a small budget and went on to become super profitable and cult classics among horror fans. The Blair Witch Project basically pioneering the found footage subgenre. The success of the Blair Witch Project in comparison to its budget made it the most profitable movie until Paranormal Activity came out, and since has been parodied in a bunch of media, including The Simpsons. Martin Wayne also made his own parody on it, and even the Scary Movie franchise parodied it in its 5th installment, which led to this very interesting scene between Charlie Sheen and Lindsay Lohan. Will a small budget and a small cast lead to a small body count? I mean, probably, but let's get to the kills. I mean, deaths. The movie begins with a title card, reading. And no, this movie isn't actually based on a true story. Similar to the Blair Witch Project, both movies begin with this type of message, trying to lead the audience into believing that the events in this film are real, with both movies having their characters use the same name as their actor's real name. The movie takes place in San Diego, California. We see Katie as she arrives at her and her boyfriend's house. And you better enjoy this shot of the outside world while you can, because this is about as far as we get from outside the house. And as Katie arrives inside, she admires Mika's new camera.
This is big and impressive.
That's what she said!
Mika says that there is paranormal phenomena going on in their house, and he bought the camera to capture it. Katie mentions that this sort of thing has been happening to her since she was 8. We will learn more about that later on. Also later on in the series. As they're sitting on the couch, Katie hears a noise. And it's not just Mika's killer guitar skills. They go to investigate the noise, only to discover that it was just the ice maker. Mika briefly entertains the idea of using the camera to make a sex tape, which then leads to... Whoops, wrong movie. So then Mika sets up the camera, and so begins night 1. Around 2 a.m. in the morning, while Mika and Katie are asleep, you can hear the sound of footsteps, as well as something falling to the ground. In the morning, they wake up to find Katie's keys on the floor, although she says that she left them on the counter. And Mika teases her that this is undeniable evidence that an evil spirit came from the grave to move her keys. They then go chill in the pool, but don't get too excited though, because this is literally the only time they use the pool in this entire movie. But not to worry, since there's a lot more scenes involving a pool in the next movie. Sorry, wrong movie again. Katie then calls a sidekick to come over and help them out with their situation, as Mika's clearly not taking the situation seriously, and doesn't believe a sidekick could help them. The sidekick then arrives, and Katie tells him about her past, as we learn more about her childhood and her paranormal experiences. Katie says that she would always wake up to a shadowy figure at the foot of her bed, and how it was never at the foot of her sister's bed, but only her bed, which gets retconned in a later movie. Katie also mentions that there's an unexplainable fire that started and how it burnt down her first childhood home. And after they moved to a new house, the unexplainable things started to happen again. The sidekick says that whatever this thing is, it is following Katie. Then the sidekick gets a tour around the house as Katie tells him about the unexplainable things that have been happening, like the lights flickering, finding the faucets running, and banging and scratching sounds on the walls. But most of the activity takes place in the bedroom, such as whispering that only Katie can hear. It even whispers her name directly. The sidekick says that whatever this is, it feeds off of negative energy. Mika then makes a joke about how Katie's mother shouldn't come over anymore then, which doesn't make much sense if you've seen the third movie. The sidekick comes to the conclusion that this is not a ghost that they're dealing with. This is a demon. And he says that she cannot run from this, since it will follow her. Mika asks if he can get a Ouija board and just ask it what it wants. But the sidekick says that if he tries to communicate with it, that will be inviting it in. And what it probably wants is Katie. And since demons aren't his area of expertise, he gives them the contact information of a demonologist. After he leaves, Mika still doesn't seem to be taking this seriously, and doesn't want Katie calling the demonologist, but she says if it gets worse, she will. Later that night, as they're both asleep, the door moves on its own, which doesn't seem like much, but it definitely scared the heck out of past Dallas. Then in the morning, they review the footage, but they don't react as nearly as scared as past Dallas was. And as Mika's showing off his killer guitar skills again, he hears Katie screaming. As he goes to check it out, he finds out it was just a spider. But they still don't react to a spider as nearly as scared as past Dallas would. Or present Dallas. Later that night, after Katie wakes up from a bad dream, they hear a loud bang and go to investigate. But they don't find anything, so they just go back to sleep. Later that day, Katie and her friend Amber are in the middle of bead time when Mika interrupts them, but apparently he doesn't know that you should never interrupt bead time. So they reluctantly follow Mika and see what was so important that he had to interrupt bead time. And what Mika wanted to show them was a recording from last night that he has of the demon trying to speak to them. Then Mika suggests getting a Ouija board so they could ask it if it wants to join them for some bead time. But the girls are all like, no boys allowed during bead time. So they make Mika promise that he won't buy a Ouija board. So Mika says that he promises he won't buy a Ouija board. So you know he's gonna buy one anyway. Later that night, Mika stupidly taunts the demon and challenges him to show him what he's got. Then the demon's all like, challenge accepted. Then the demon shows him exactly what he's got. Then they go downstairs to investigate, but there's nothing there, although the chandelier is shaking, and Mika's like, maybe I shouldn't have taunted this thing, and then we're all like, you think? Later that day, Mika tries to talk to it and asks him the important questions, like what his favorite color is. But since he's given the silent treatment, Mika asks him if he'd be more comfortable communicating with a Ouija board, and he responds with a Later that night, or early morning, Katie can't seem to fall asleep, so she gets up and stands there for about 2 hours straight. This is probably the most iconic shot of the entire movie, and not surprisingly, scared the heck out of past Dallas as well. Then when Katie goes and leaves the room, Mika wakes up and starts searching for her. He then finds her outside on the swing, and even though it's cold out and she's in her pajamas, she refuses to go back inside. When Mika is looking for blankets to give to Katie, he hears a loud bang coming from their bedroom. He then goes upstairs to find that the demon was just watching some TV. Then Katie's all like, boo! And since Mika didn't find that very funny, they go back to bed. In the morning they review the footage, and Katie must have been totally wasted because she doesn't remember any of this happening. Then Mika comforts Katie by giving her a hug. Aw, that's nice. Then we find out, to no one's surprise, that the idiot Mika went out and bought a Ouija board. And also to no one's surprise, Katie gets pissed at Mika. When Katie and Mika leave the house, the demon tries to write something on the board, probably about how upset he was about not being invited to bead time. Then Mika watches the footage and tries to decipher what the demon was saying, but to no success. Mika then has a brilliant idea. He puts powder on the floor, so if the demon comes in the room, he will leave footsteps, which is another very iconic moment in the movie. The footsteps then lead them to the attic. Mika then goes up there to check it out, because apparently he's never seen a horror movie before. What he finds is a burnt picture of Katie as a kid, which will be explained in the next movie. Katie finally decides to contact the demonologist after reviewing the footage from last night. But unfortunately for them, Dr. Avery's is out of town, so not knowing what to do, Katie calls the sidekick back, and he says that he'll come over the next day. That night, the demon is still screwing with them, slamming doors closed, slamming on the doors, and some more slamming doors. Later, while they're casually eating as if they're not being terrorized by a demon, they hear a loud smash upstairs. They find a shattered picture of them together. And is it just me, or does that girl in the photo look nothing like Katie? I don't know, maybe it's just me. When the sidekick arrives, he quickly says, "Ah, heck no! You fools are on your own," and then dips. While Mika and Katie are both sleeping, the demon pulls a Tarantino and lifts the covers so he can get a good look at her feet. And she must have had some real gross feet, because then he pieces out after that. Mika does some research and finds this girl that had all the same things happen to her that happened to Katie. We also learn that her name is Diane, which was one of the possibilities that may have been written on the Ouija board. Oh yeah, and she's kinda dead now. RIP. At 4 a.m. in the morning, another super iconic moment happens in the movie, where Katie gets grabbed by the foot and dragged out of bed and down the hallway. And this scene right here is the main reason why I never let my feet hang off the bed. The next day, they find out that the demon got a little too kinky and even bit Katie. After Mika's done packing and ready to dip, Katie and her new friend doesn't want to leave anymore.
I think we'll be okay now.
And as you may have guessed, Katie is now possessed. On night 21, the final night, Katie gets up and is all like, "There is no Katie, only Zool." And she gets out of bed and goes over to Mika's side to stare at him for 3 hours. Then when she's done with her stalking, she leaves the room and goes downstairs. Then when she's down there, she lets out a terrifying screech. When all is silent, you can hear Katie slowly walking up the stairs. And next thing you know, Mika's getting yeeted at the camera. Katie has killed Mika, stabbing him to death multiple times off screen. Then Katie gets up in the face of the camera and is all like, "Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here." And then the movie ends. But originally, that wasn't the movie's ending. There's 3 endings to this movie. In the original ending, Katie came back upstairs, not to throw Mika's body at the camera, but to sit down on the floor next to the bed and rock back and forth. Later in the morning, Katie's friend Amber calls them, but with no response, she gets concerned. Later that night, Amber comes over to check on Katie, and after discovering the body of Mika, she books it out the door, and she must have called the police, because later that day, the police arrive at the house. And when they find Katie, they open fire because she won't drop the knife. And Oren Peli really wanted to keep this ending, but test audiences didn't seem to like it. And Oren Peli was finally convinced to change the ending by Steven Spielberg himself. And who could say no to Steven Spielberg? And in the third and final ending, Katie comes upstairs to slit her throat with a knife. And although both of the alternative endings gives us an extra death to our tally, I still prefer the theatrical ending, because we probably wouldn't have the franchise without it. So how many deaths do we get when you're being terrorized by a demon and your boyfriend's an idiot? Well, let's find out at the tally. But first... Just kidding, I don't have the budget for a green screen, but I still can tell you the numbers. With 1 male death, that leaves us with a blueberry pie chart. And with a runtime of 86 minutes, that leaves us with a kill on average every 1 minute. That doesn't sound right. Both the Golden Hatchet and Dull Dagger awards will go to Mika. I mean, obviously, he's the only death in the movie. What did you expect? And that's Paranormal Activity. Well, the first one anyway. I mean, there's 5 sequels, and I was planning on doing them, but this took a lot longer than I thought it would, and I might give in eventually, but who knows? But yeah, anyway, I'm Dallas M. Pomfrey, and this has been the Death Tally. So yeah, as you might have guessed, this has been a parody on James A Janisse's videos, the kill count on Dead Meat. And I am not making this video to make fun of him in any way. This is like my love letter to him, because I've been wanting him to make the Paranormal Activity movies, or I mean put them on the kill count for a while now. So yeah, this is a love letter. I don't even know if he's gonna see it, but I really enjoyed making this, kind of. And yeah, so I love the kill count, love James, I love his channel. So yeah, this is just something I did for fun. And I don't know if I'll do it again, but I might. Anyway, be good people.